Hey, Mike, did you happen to watch the inauguration today?
Was that today?
Yeah, it was, and apparently not as many people were watching as they anticipated.
I just put it on demand. I recorded it. I'll watch it later.
I can see how big an impact this is having on your life. This is like a monumental moment in American history.
This is the biggest moment since 4 years ago.
Well,
since the last inauguration.
I can't argue with that. I did find it interesting, though, as I was watching the prayers that they were having.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that there was big walls around, and used to you'd see these mobs of people on the mall. I didn't see any of that this time.
None. It was probably the most different inauguration. But I have to be honest, I didn't really watch the last one.
Wow, you are so unpatriotic. But today we're talking...
That's offensive, Ben.
You mean like the fence around...
Oh, I see what you did there. Offensive. I see what you did there. That was pretty clever.
All right. Well, today is not your normal Bible talk. Today we're talking about the transfer of power. And so I think it's time to talk not your normal Bible talk.
Let's do it.
2 men.
Dude. Come on, dude.
2 cups of coffee.
I've never had anything like this.
1 table.
This is not your normal Bible talk.
This is a podcast.
Bringing the tough topics to sip on.
Guacamole or guacamole?
Whatever.
Mike Colburn.
I have a tendency to remain quiet.
Ben Orian.
You haven't told me a dumb dad joke yet today, and I certainly haven't told you one.
This is not your normal Bible talk.
Oh, boy.
It's the Thinking Cup podcast.
Oh, boy.
Welcome to the Thinking Cup podcast.
Hey, welcome back to the Thinking Cup podcast on the day of the inauguration of the President of the United States. And this is the Thinking Cup. I'm Ben. He's Mike. Thanks for joining us today. We are on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora.
Is there anywhere we aren't at?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that, because the answer is no. We are on every platform that you can be on for a podcast.
Are we on ham radio?
I didn't know that was a platform for podcasting.
That's right. We're good.
But we're on YouTube as well. And if you missed last week's episode on cancel culture, you missed a fun one. That was a great conversation.
I had a great time. It was enjoyable.
Yeah.
Very much so.
I enjoyed that one as well. I'm looking forward to today. I don't know, maybe part of the reason I am fascinated by the inauguration is just because I love history. And I've been a student of history my whole life. I really thoroughly enjoy studying it. And so whether I have agreed with the politician being inaugurated or not, I have still found it interesting and fascinating to watch. And I'll be honest, there's a certain amount of pride that I take as an American, watching Old Glory fly in the wind and realize the history that's there. And the fact that whether I agree with the man in the office or not, the office of president is a sacred office in American culture. So we're going to talk about the transfer of power today. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm feeling very empowered. Dude, I am just...
Should I give you one of those?
I'm full of it today.
You're full. What are we full of? What are we drinking?
I am really enjoying this coffee.
Yeah?
So... I was trying to decide which one we were going to have today, and there was one that I felt like was very apropos because it was like a Colombian Jesus. It actually had Jesus' name in the – so, I mean, what better coffee? But I went a different route.
Okay.
This is Rwanda Kanzu, number 5. I've never tried the first 4.
What's the significance of number 5?
That is a deep philosophical question there, and I don't think we have time today.
I didn't know it was so philosophical. I just wanted an answer.
I have no idea. But this has notes of honeycomb, plum, maple syrup, and apricot, and it is mixed with the pH Delight syrup and it just is a cup of deliciousness in your mouth.
It really is good. So what are you rating this? Because we've rated coffees over the days.
We were talking about this. It is not like, it's not above a 9. It's in the 8s for me. It's like it's like an 8.37 to be exact.
8. You just made that up, didn't you? Yeah, you want to put it in the 8s. I'm probably going to go in the 7s myself. It's not the best brew I've ever had, but
dude, I'm offended.
I
can't believe you would say 7.
Well, I do like the plum coming through.
Is that because it's a perfect coffee?
There you go. It passed judgment. No, there was that one that you gave me. It's been some time ago, and I've actually been shopping for it because I've got this little. It's called a coffee purse, and I put all my loose change up in that. You're laughing.
Is it like a man purse?
It's a curse. It's coffee purse.
Coffee curse.
It's a curse. And so I have all this change in it, and I've been stopping at Onyx trying to buy the Juan Jimenez.
Yeah.
And they are sold out of it like every single time, and I can't get my hands on it.
So if our listeners are wanting to donate, how do they donate to your
to my curse?
To your curse.
Well, I'm on the Cash App. I'm happy for you to use that.
We have no shame.
No shame at all.
When you love coffee, you have no shame. Anyone wants to buy you a cup, you're welcome to it.
And you know what the funny thing about that is, Mike, is I have never been a huge fan of the coffee as much as I was a bigger fan of the cream and sugar. But since I've been tasting some of these different brews and blends and roasts, I am having because you can tell an absolute difference between some of these and like a Starbucks blend.
So I gave you a bag last week, and it was like raspberry chocolate, right?
Raspberry caramel.
Raspberry. Is it caramel or caramel? Never mind.
Does it have an A or not? Anyway.
And you said it just wasn't as good, right? It was
I put that down around a 6 or a 7. It's not a bad roast. It's far better than Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts or some of those. But that raspberry was coming through so strong. If you like raspberry, you'll love it. Yeah. But it was a little different.
Good stuff.
Let's talk about...
let's transfer some power.
All right, let's do it. So, Mike, I was watching the inauguration today, and I think folks by now know that I'm neither Republican nor Democrat. I just watch. I do agree with certain sides on certain issues, but I was watching today as the media was literally tripping over themselves, happy that they finally have their man in the office. It was unmistakable.
Big accomplishment.
Yeah, it was just plain and simple, unmistakable. Unless you're watching Fox News. Now, if you're watching Fox News, they're a little more reserved on the glory and grandeur that they're offering the new president. I find it interesting because 4 years is etched in my mind. 4 years ago, because I watched the inauguration then. In fact, I've watched every inauguration going back to Bill Clinton, his first one. And I've been able to sit and enjoy watching that portion of history. Maybe it happened before. Maybe I was just too young. Maybe I just didn't notice. Maybe I wasn't so influenced by the polarization of our society that we're in. But I saw a stark difference between 4 years ago and today, and the way the news media responded to it. And you'll remember 4 years ago, there was a whole movement that came out of this, the Not My President movement.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any of that today. So how do we let's talk for just a minute, because everybody was worried there wasn't going to be a peaceful balance transfer of power.
Yeah,
there was a pretty peaceful transfer of power.
Yeah,
but we're going to talk about the wall and some of those other things in a few moments. But this whole "not my president" thing, if you were to say that today, if you're a Trump supporter, not only are you going to get canceled likely on your social media platforms, but you're going to get blacklisted in society. What's the response here? Because 4 years ago, it was the way to go. It was the trending part of culture. Not my president. What's going on?
I find it really interesting how the tables change, the dynamic changes, it shifts. If someone were to say that, now I will say that as I was watching, there were some that were watching the live streams that were saying that, right? The people were saying This is not, it was stolen. I mean, there was a lot of, and unfortunately, I hate to say this, there's a lot of hate going on.
Yes.
And now it's flipped.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the Democratic Party. Now it's the Republican Party that's doing the angry faces, doing the, hey, this isn't my president. The tables have turned.
Yeah.
Which I find very ironic. And there is a sense of people feeling that this isn't my president. I find the comment funny in the first place because, unfortunately, it is your president.
Yeah, he is.
Like, there's no, even if you don't acknowledge him, he is the president, period.
Right.
He's the one that sits in that position.
So 4 years ago, they started the Not My President movement before he was even inaugurated.
Mm-hmm. Today,
the president has been president for, at the time of our recording, 3 or 4 hours, maybe 5 at the most. He hasn't even had a chance to do anything to make anybody upset.
Yeah.
It was 19 minutes into Trump's presidency that they started talking process of impeachment. And I mean, he hadn't even had a chance to write his first executive order yet.
So back to the impeachment, there are news outlets that are excited that this particular previous president was impeached twice.
Yeah. Well, and what's really fascinating is the impeachment process is still continuing, even though he's not president. So it's technically unconstitutional to impeach somebody who's no longer president.
Well, there was a lot of
Are you having trouble there?
Unconstitutional. Last week you did this fail on me.
I did. Can I do it again today?
I think you can do it again.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, if you didn't see that, you need to go back and watch it. No, look, the issue here is it's not about constitutionality to me. To me, it's about there is so much hatred going on in our society right now. You don't have to be a Trump supporter or a Biden supporter. Look, I didn't vote for one or the other. It doesn't matter. They're still my president. And I don't even know if I'm going to like Biden or not. His preamble, I'm not excited about America not being independent, with natural resources. That seems to be going away, and gas prices have been going up since he told us what he was going to do, the Keystone Pipeline. Yeah. I don't know if you heard this. He's going to reverse some of Trump's immigration policy, and now there are people in Honduras and Guatemala literally by the tens of thousands trying to get into Mexico so they can come into the United States, and Mexico is sending their National Guard to the southern border to stop all this. And really what's most troubling in the middle of all that is they're doing this in the midst of a pandemic. Yeah. And COVID is running crazy through those. It's almost like one reporter mentioned it looked like the children of Israel, this big stream of people literally just walking through the nation to get here to the United States. And so you may be in favor of immigration and all those other. I'm not here to debate that. All I'm saying is that these leaders have an impact on the outcome, and he hasn't even been president for 5 hours, and these things are already going on around us, and that gives us a kind of a clue as to what's coming.
Yeah, I have I'm not a prophet. I don't know the future. In case anyone wondered, just for clarity, right? I have a feeling that a lot of what Biden will do in his presidency is intentionally undo what was previously done, just for the sake of undoing it. Yeah. There's a lot of talks about, how they're going to undo some of the transgender, what was dealt with and what you can and can't do there. A lot of business, economy related things are going to be undone. A lot of the tariffs, a lot of the interactions that we have with foreign industries, those are going to be potentially overturned. Taxes are going to be changed. I mean, there's just a lot of, and in the midst of all that, what I find unsettling is how many times Biden talked about unity in his speech.
Yeah, he really did.
It just was... It was uncomfortable. It was almost like it was a phony act to over dramatize the fact that maybe people didn't feel like they were unified before, and now that they got the clown out of the office is the way it's being portrayed. Now we can move on with life, and now we can unify behind, and now we can forget about all of the riots and all the other things and don't need to worry about all this other stuff because now we're good to go.
Yeah. There is no question that there was cancel culture in his speech.
He must have listened to our podcast.
Maybe that's why we got 4 thumbs up.
I was gonna say that would be so bad. That goes into that right there goes into. Did you see the number of people that were watching the inauguration?
No, I didn't see the numbers.
So the thought crossed my mind. Okay, we had supposedly over 80 million people that voted for this current president. I wonder what the percentages traditionally have been of how many people watch the inauguration. Maybe you have the exact number, but on the network that I was on, it was like 22,000 were watching.
Yeah, we don't have the official numbers. They'll take a few days to pull all those numbers in from the various networks and so forth. On hand at the Capitol itself, there were less than 1,500 total guests, as opposed to the 200,000 guests that they had 4 years ago.
But there was 25,000 military troops with a fence.
There was that.
Just for safeguard.
I was thinking about this as you were talking a moment ago. There certainly was a cancel culture element to his speech. His call for unity. Look, I don't disagree. We have a need for unity right now.
Absolutely.
America is divided. Our platform, you and I, have tried to have a unifying voice with whoever's listening to say, look, it needs to not be so much about Republican and Democrat. It needs to be about Americans. It needs to be about people. There needs to be a compassionate voice and understanding going on. And we've tried to do that. So there's no question that needs to happen. But what I have heard from the campaign and from the Biden team is that they want to redo and undo a lot of what the Trump presidency was about, which is interesting, though, Mike. And if we're going to be honest and fair, a lot of what Trump set out to do when he first took office was to undo a lot of what Obama had done, which was interesting because a lot of what Obama tried to undo in his first 2 years as president was to undo what Bush had done, which I could take you back in history.
Maybe that's the purpose of the presidency. It's just to undo the previous person.
Well, if that's all they're doing, then it explains why there continues to be more polarization going on in society and why the left and the right keep pushing further and further left and right.
Yeah.
Because all they want to do is undo the other. To me, stop worrying about what your predecessor did and let's make decisions that are in the best interest of our nation. Ronald Reagan was reported to have said, in fact, actually there's a video of him floating around that he says he sat down, and I don't remember if it was in his first 5 or 6 days in office or might have even been before. He sat down with his advisors and he says, guys, I don't want to know if this is a Democrat or a Republican decision, and I don't care what the response is going to be. I want to know what's in the best interest of the American people, and that's the course of action that we're going to take. There are going to be times when we take the best course of action that people aren't going to understand and they're not going to like it, but they're going to benefit from it in the long run. And you don't even have to like Ronald Reagan, but there's something to be said for that kind of leadership. I think that's what we're missing in today's society going forward.
Absolutely. Well, it is certainly going to be interesting as we move into the first couple of weeks and they pick the cabinet and they go through the process. It's going to be at least an interesting next couple of years.
Well, even these first 100 days.
Yes.
If he pulls off what he says he wants to do in these first look, I think there's some good things in there. It remains to be seen if they will be good for the people.
Absolutely.
Warning, dumb dad jokes ahead.
No!
I hope you've got some good ones today, man.
boy, have I come prepared. By the way, I absolutely loved the little points there. Like that was a good little touch.
So I don't give you points.
Who won, by the way?
Well, we tied last week because I don't give you points. Or I don't give us points if we laugh at our own jokes. Although we should take a point away if we laugh at our own jokes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be very stoic today.
Well, you laugh at all your own jokes.
Are you ready for this? Are you ready?
Hit me.
Right.
Well, don't hit me, but hit me. Gotcha.
Here we go. So, in light of the transfer of power, I've been hearing a lot of jokes about unemployed people, but none of them work. I didn't even get a chuckle.
That was,
I
don't know if I feel bad for the people who aren't working.
Man, all right, tough crowd.
So talking about getting hit, I got hit in the head with a can of Diet Coke today. Don't worry, I'm not hurt. It was a soft drink. I think that was a laugh.
That was a soft laugh. Okay, all right. So my wife and I are working on our marriage relationship. We want to get to know each other a little bit better. So she said that I don't have any empathy. I don't understand why she feels that way.
I tried to hold that one in. Oh my goodness. So a burrito is just a soft taco that believed in his music so much that he became a rapper.
So bad. So bad. So bad. So I've been trying to really understand what it looks like through other people's kind of the lens that they see life through. So I began reading a horror novel in Braille. Something bad is about to happen. I can feel it.
I'm glad I didn't take a drink of coffee right then. Oh my goodness. So I have this rule at my house because I'm not really this great handyman. I never worked on a toilet, but my wife told me that doing so would build character, meaning I'm too cheap to call a plumber and so are you. So I worked on it and now it runneth over.
You about stumbled on that one.
I almost caused myself a problem.
All right. So if I had $1 million, I'd donate a quarter of it to a charity. It's nice of me, right?
That's a nice thought.
Yeah. Then I'd have $999,999.75.
I really should not look at you when I'm telling or looking at these jokes. Oh my goodness. I remember as a kid, my neighbor got fired from his job as a road worker. He got fired because of all the theft that was going on. And I just couldn't believe he would do something like that until I went over to his place and saw the signs. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
you got one more?
I got this last one. Ready?
What
biscuit does a short person like?
Oh my, I have no idea.
Shortbread.
Warning, dumb dad jokes ahead.
No!
I think it's safe to say you won today. I was just laughing.
Yes. Well, just for the record, I was prepping and planning. Practice makes
I got
perfect,
you last
right?
week with my wonton soup, so
That's
you know.
Right. Wonton.
Oh my goodness. That's so. It's actually. I'll tell you a story about that. When Dominic was little, my wife loves Chinese food or Thai food or sushi, Japanese food. She loves Oriental food, and we would go to these restaurants, and never. Got to understand, never meant disrespect. I realize that what I'm about to say could border on that, but it was never meant disrespectfully. But we always chuckled because, and it doesn't matter if you go to a Thai restaurant or to a Mexican food restaurant, and I'm talking about authentic. I'm not talking about the American. I'm talking about where Ma and Pa make the food, because that's where the best food's at.
Right.
And we always tip well as well. But they would come and we could never understand them. We could never Like they would ask us what we wanted. And one time Dominic was like 3 years old, and this lady was trying to ask us what we wanted, and she couldn't understand what she couldn't understand. And Dominic finally, he looked up at her exasperated, and he goes, "Fried rice! I want fried rice!" And she goes, "Oh, fried rice!" You know, totally understood Dominic, and we had this laugh out loud moment. But
that's so funny.
So much good stuff going on there. We have a brand new Thai place in Siloam Springs that we checked out the other day. Good stuff. All right, we're not talking about food. Let's talk about unity.
We can be unified about food.
It is the great unifier.
Yeah, so I think it's this whole thing, unity as well as just kind of the overall biblical perspective of transfer of power. Because if we go back into Scripture and we look at, was the Israelite nation always unified? Were they always, in the same perspective? Did they always head in the same direction? And I think from a biblical perspective, we find a lot of what's happening paralleling what we see going on between the Democrat and the Republican Party, going from one side to another side. Now, I'm not going to say who's what and who's. I'm not going to put my thoughts on that. But if you look in the Old Testament, there was this movement towards what God wanted, and then there was a movement away from it. We had good kings, we had bad kings. And there was a transfer of power through those transitions, right?
Right.
Now, how it transferred is a little bit different than our democracy now. I think there was some death that happened. There was some like hunting down and killing people. It was a little bit of a different transfer of power.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to note that God still worked through those time periods, and that's when prophets oftentimes came in. Is when there was when the people of God were being misled. They were not worshiping the one true God, the God above all gods, and they needed someone else to speak that voice into them. So
there's something to be said for that. When we're following God, when we are living life from a biblical perspective. And I realize that there can be some variances in there, but the bottom line is that we are trying to live in such a way that would be pleasing to God. Life is different, but what I see in our world today is a gross clamoring for more power, and it's not just on Capitol Hill and in Washington. I mean, we can see it in our everyday lives. Just driving here this afternoon to record. Car came flying around me on a blind curve because I was apparently going too slow for him, honking the horn, trying to get there a little bit faster or whatever, which is really funny because I came around 3 more corners and there he is stuck at the next stoplight. And I think that in some ways, some would say, well, that's instant karma. I don't tend to believe in that kind of stuff, but what I do believe in is just treat people right, live like you're supposed to, and when there is a certain godliness that goes in with whoever's in charge, it's amazing how more peaceful, how much more, I almost used the word blessed, but the nation seems to be a whole lot more productive as a whole. This is clearly seen in the Old Testament, all right, when Hezekiah becomes king after his father, and we were laughing earlier, is it Ahaz or Ahaz? Well, it depends on if you're Southern like I am or Hebrew. If you're Hebrew, it's Ahaz, and if you're Southern, it's Ahaz, But Ahaz was an immoral king.
Yeah.
And Hezekiah was a godly king, and he was probably second to David and Solomon, or third to David and Solomon, the wealthiest king in Israel history.
Yeah, so I was sitting here thinking while you were
preaching.
Ahas. The question came to mind, how do, we were talking about unity. And how do we unify when the principles and the morality that's being presented goes contrary to my understanding of what God, like, should I be unified on that? Or are there other aspects that I should unify and leave that part out? Like, how do you unify a nation that, let's be very honest, it's less Christian than it's ever been before.
Correct.
I don't know what the stats are, but it's certainly less than 50% of the United States. Or close to it.
It's close to it. I don't know that it's dropped below because and it just depends on how you classify that. There are people who still identify as Christian whether they walk through a church door or not. But I think your question is a really great question, and it goes to a deeper understanding of what's going on. In the most simplistic way of answering this, I think that one of the things that we have is that people are not necessarily doing what's in the best interest of the country. They're doing what's best interest of their political careers and their positions and their authority. Let's just be honest for just a second. I saw what Trump did over the last 3 or 4 weeks as nothing short of an attempt to continue to hold the power that he had. And you can say, well, what was he supposed to do? I'm not telling you he was wrong for doing that, although I didn't like some of the tactics that his followers used. But I also don't personally fault Trump for what his followers did. I know that there's some people out there who are going to disagree with me on that. I'm looking for a compassionate understanding. That would be like one of my church members robbing a bank and then blaming me for something I had said in my sermon. I think that as you were talking, as you were asking the question, I couldn't help but think of Jesus with his 12 disciples on the night that he was, even the last week before he was betrayed. And think about this. They enter the upper room, and the disciples are arguing among themselves who among them is the best. James and John are so enamored with power that they go to their mom and say, Mom, I don't think Jesus can say no to you. So why don't you go to Jesus and ask him that we can sit on your left and your right when you get your throne? Judas was there because he was hoping for something better. Judas wasn't converted. He was convicted, but he didn't act on that conviction. He wasn't converted. And as a result, he ends up leaving the table. Why? Because Jesus isn't measuring up to what he thinks he should do. So you have this room full of division, and yet 40 days later, 50 days later, these are the same men at Pentecost that turn the world upside down with their preaching. And 3,000 people that first day are saved. I think Christ is the great unifier. I think if we could get our eyes off of ourselves and onto him, we'd see something differently.
I completely agree. I want to point us back to a story that I found really interesting from one of my studies this last week in Scripture. It's a story taken out of 1 Samuel 23. And we're talking about transfer of power, and it's so funny. This battle between two powers, right? Here you've got David and you've got Saul. And if you remember, Saul was like hunting David down, right? So in this story, and you guys are welcome to read the first 13 verses of 1 Samuel 23. Basically, David hears that something is going to go down in Keilah. Keilah is the name of the city. And so he goes to kind of deal with that. He goes to that city. Saul finds out that he's there, and he says, I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm going to march on the city. I'm not only going to take the city down and the people in the city down, but now's my chance to take David down. And David actually calls on Yahweh and says, hey, is if I stay here in this place and continue to help these people, will Saul get his way? And Yahweh responded, yes, he will. And it's an interesting study because this is one place in Scripture where God actually says what's going to happen, but then David does something else and it doesn't happen. Which is the difference between foreknowledge and predestination. It's a big conversation. A lot of people think about predestination and how that works inside of God's understanding and what he does. So the point of this is, who are you listening to? Who are you getting your advice from when you're making decisions, when you're trying to interact with other people? See, David asked again, and God said, yes, he will absolutely take you down. So what did he do? He left. Saul came. David wasn't there. He didn't take the city down. He didn't capture David. Someone would ask the question, well, then was God wrong? That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
But my point in telling this story is who, especially in this time period, we have a battle between authorities, right? Battle between one party, another party, one idea and another idea. I would argue that it's a battle between God and no God, or other gods might be a better way of looking at it. Who do we take our decisions or ideas to? Who do we ask for help from? Do we ask politicians? Do we ask our friends? Do we ask our pastor? Maybe we should talk about it. Maybe we should ask him. Because he's the one that ultimately knows. He's the one that has the world. He created it.
A word from the Bible.
In the beginning was the Word.
That's some really good thoughts you just gave us, Mike, and I'm inclined to agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I think that I think that the world would do much better if we could look to Christ and be saved.
And not just give lip service to
No,
that.
no,
actually
actually do it.
Look to Christ, to pray before Him, to study His Word,
Yeah,
to seek
absolutely.
out the understanding.
I couldn't agree more. And this whole idea of power, when we don't need power, think about it. Christ had all the power, and He gave it up to be a human being. He gave every bit of it up. The transfer of power, He walked away from it all.
Yeah.
That's my word for today, actually, is the word power. And what's really fascinating is Jesus gave up all the power to come to earth, but today's word from the word is the word power. Jesus says you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you. There's a different kind of power that comes into living today versus what people are searching for and clamoring for. Was it Howard Hughes, I think, was asked, when is it enough? And he said, it's never enough. There's a certain humility that goes with Christ and His power that is so attractive to me. And I would just throw this out as I'm diving into this for a moment, and that is this. It doesn't matter whether we've had Republican presidents or Democrat presidents. I've been able to live at peace with all of my neighbors all the way through. When Clinton was president, when Bush was president, that was a heated, controversial election too. Bush and Gore and Obama and now Trump and Biden. I live at peace with my neighbors. I'm not worried about their politics. And maybe that's because I don't need that power. Power is a word. This word for power occurs 120 times in the New Testament, and it literally means strength or to have ability, and it's the Greek word dunamis. This idea of dunamis isn't just any power. This is miraculous power. Remember in Mark chapter 5, Jesus is walking down through the streets, and there is this woman that comes up behind him, and she touches his robe, and Jesus stops, and he goes, "Who touched me?" And the disciples are like, "What are you talking about?" But the Bible says explicitly in Mark chapter 5 that Jesus stopped because He felt the power go out of Him. Marvelous and miraculous power. It's also an inherent power Jesus has by virtue of who He is. Jesus said in Matthew 24, verse 30, that then the signs of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Here's the cool thing. This word power is the Greek word dunamis. It's where we get our English word dynamite. Boom. It's an amazing power, God's strength, His power, and it's real, and it's an inexplicable power that can make a positive difference. Most importantly, in us. Maybe the transfer of power needs to not be so much of us clamoring for power, but us transferring our power to him, and then we can truly live at peace. And that's today's word from the Word.
A word from the Bible.
In the beginning was the Word.
Dude, that was powerful.
I see what you did there.
That was dynamite.
Oh, that was good. You're loaded. Hey,
That was a mic drop.
Hey.
You know what someone said this last week? That they were going to do a mic drop. They were going to put me in a bag and they were going to drop me.
Oh,
I was like, I'm not sure I feel comfortable with that. Can we get a stunt double on that one?
That may not be good. Hey, I am almost out of coffee, and I could use one for the road. You got something brewing that you can share with us as we wrap this up?
Yeah, I have really appreciated the transparent conversation. I think that what you hit on during the word from the Bible, I think is really important. And I want to just kind of restate in just a little different thought. And that is, where do you get your power from? And I think as we think about the concept of unity, as we think about how can we be unified at home, how can we be unified at work, how can we be unified at church, how can we be unified as a body of believers, and then as we think about the community and as we think about how we engage politically and as a government and as civil individuals, how are we unified? I think it does come down to who has the power. And if we put our power and our desires in that of man, we're going to be in trouble. And again, we see plenty of examples of that in Scripture where bad kings said, hey, I've got the power.
Yeah.
Or I've got another God that's got the power, right?
Right.
And we see that was detrimental. It's not in the plan. It's not in God's plan at all. And so my encouragement to the listener is, who is giving you the power? Who are you plugged into? And I think if we answer that and we really get plugged into the source of ultimate power, that's when unity around that one vision can kind of come into focus. And I think that's where we're going to see some true healing. I know we've been a lot of the politicians are talking about healing, but we all know that the only true physician that can provide healing is God.
That's right.
And so that is what my prayer is. That's what my desire is for those that are listening, that will be listening, that as we go through the up-and-coming next 100 days, the next couple of years, that we will find unity in the one that has true power, and that is Christ and Christ alone.
That's really good. That's a good one to take on the road, Mike.
I hope it sustains you.
I think it will. But, as you were talking, I just couldn't help but think, when I was a kid growing up, the tendency is to say, but he did it. But he did it.
Yeah.
They only have power over you if you give them the power over you.
It's your fault.
It's your fault. It's always my fault. I just think of Jesus' words where he said, don't be afraid of those who want to kill you, but they can't touch your soul.
Yeah.
Don't let them have. Hey, that's it for us for today. Mike, it was a great conversation. Enjoyed it as always.
Is it already over?
I look forward to doing these.
That's so good.
We were off for a month, and I was like, are we going to record? I know. So glad to be doing this again. Thanks for making us a part of your playlist this week. If you've enjoyed this episode, we invite you to give us a good review and a like. Of course, we covered those shares as well. You can find us on Facebook at The Thinking Cup Podcast. We're also online at www.thethinkingcup.com.
Yeah, and I just want to say again, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for I'm just going to call them patrons. Thank you for all the people that believe in what we do. We so appreciate it. We would love to have you pray for the ministry, pray for what it is that we're doing here, and send us a message, because we would love to hear some questions, thoughts, ideas that you would like to hear about. That being said, that's it. Next time.
See you next time.